Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Agency. This week, I'm super pumped to have Sam Shepler here. He is head of StorySnap, which most people might know him from Testimonial Hero or his other company, Product Type. But I'm really looking forward to kind of understanding how he approaches growth because he's done a really good job with it. So thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks, David. Yeah, really stoked to be here and excited to dig in.
Awesome. Well, we talked previously and, we pulled out a number of sort of strong opinions that you've developed over the years through all your experience. And you've successfully built a high seven-figure agency almost entirely based on project work, which is quite the feat. What would you say is kind of the way that most agencies think wrong about MRR?
Yeah, thank you. And great question. First, I will say like the caveat is when I think about projects, I always want there to be more than one project. So if there's only ever, a single project, that's very tough. Like we, ultimately sell packages to our clients. And we hope that they are going to buy 3 or 4 projects or packages over 3 or 4 years. So, I'm very much of an advocate for reoccurring revenue in the sense that, they're buying again. But I don't think that you need monthly, MRR to run a great business. And sometimes it's like shoving a square peg in a round hole. Depending on what you do in your creative agency, it just might not be something that your clients need monthly. So sometimes it's better to just embrace reality and not force that. In terms of, the way that I approach it, I think a lot of people are trying to solve this predictability problem, which is really like a lead gen problem with a billing mechanism. Mm-hmm. It's, I think I get it. Like I've been there. It's like feast or famine. People get scarred around lack of predictability. They want to make sure revenue's coming in every month. And they have this notion that just because someone's paying you every month, that's predictable. But the reality is, in marketing services, churn is extremely high. It's not like you're like in a software product that's like core to your entire operation. Like, you're not going to churn out of HubSpot once you have that like implemented, or you're not going to churn your project management system every 3 or 4 months. But people switch marketing vendors very quickly, very easily, often in like 4 to 8 months. So essentially what a lot of agencies do is they chase MRR because they like to say MRR and they feel like they need to, but really they're just putting the client on a payment plan for essentially what is a project anyways. My sort of, what I like to advocate, if again, I don't really care what people do, but I think, it's at least what we've done is like, call a spade. If people want to work on a project basis, let them. And after they complete the first project, try and sell them again when they're ready. And ultimately what that, should create is a much higher lifetime value for the customer. And that is, in my opinion, way more important. The higher, the highest lifetime value, specifically the highest lifetime gross profit, is way more important than your MRR. And, that's what I think people should optimize for, not MRR. Furthermore, we get these inverted priorities where people try to solve predictability. Like predictability is like a lack of the volatility in revenue starts with a volatility and lack in leads generated. Mm-hmm. So it's really like a sales and marketing problem that people are trying to solve with the billing mechanism. Mm-hmm. So it's like, start at the root cause. Like if you're having issues with predictability and you want to create that feeling of predictable revenue, you need to have predictable marketing and predictable lead gen. And you have to have a lot more leads coming in. And that's what's important. And that's, I guess, like the thing that it took me a while to learn is like, yeah, like start at the root cause, predictable marketing, predictable lead gen. Don't try to solve a marketing problem with a billing mechanism.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of agencies, they think because, you know, they experience the feast or famine and they just think, well, the best thing to solve for that is just to have everyone paying the same amount each month, even if that's not the best experience for those clients. And what you're saying, I think, is let the client decide what's the best experience for them, and just do things in the kind of the bundles that they're actually interested in buying, rather than forcing it into a model that doesn't make sense.
Correct. And even more so, there are actually advantages to projects as long as you're getting people to come back and it increases the LTV. Like when you sell a project, maybe it's a 20K project or a 30K project, or let's just actually say packages. Like you sell a 30K package, that might include multiple projects in that package. Ideally, you can collect that 30K upfront, or as much of it as possible upfront. And that pulling revenue forward and having that cash flow is massively helpful. If you can pull, like, let's say you sell a 50K package, having that 50K, you know, on month one, you can reinvest in growth. You can reinvest in marketing. You can do a lot more creative marketing plays with your overall go-to-market strategy, because your CAC payback period just, you know, shrunk dramatically. You can, you know, resource staff. You can do so many things. And obviously, you know, this time value of money is really what it comes down to. Now compare that if you sell a 50K project, 10K a month, it's going to take you 5 months to recoup that same amount. Mm-hmm. So I've talked to people who basically turn down, or like would rather not collect 50K up front, and they would rather do 10K a month because it gives them a feeling of predictability, which emotionally I get it, but like logically, like it's way better to have that 50K up front. And yeah, it's essentially like time value of money.
Gotcha.
So I guess what I hope, you know, someone can take away from this is what it took me, you know, many years to learn, which is that I hope someone listens to this and has the confidence to just go all in on a business, even if it is project based, because, you know, us and what we've built is evidence that you can run a great, you know, high 7-figure annual revenue business and you don't need MRR. I basically almost discarded my entire business idea because I didn't see a path to MRR back in 2018 when I started Testimonial Hero. And thank goodness I didn't do that, because it's changed my life. It's, you know, been the best thing. But I almost didn't even pursue it, because I almost like didn't meet my like criteria at the time that all the influencers were saying, if you don't find a business with MRR, like you're screwed. Like don't even bother, right? Yeah. So if there's one thing people can take away from this is, you know, don't automatically discard your business because of that. Lifetime value is more important than MRR. Churn is completely off the charts anyways when it comes to marketing services. So MRR is not really that meaningful. And if you want predictability, solve that with marketing, not your billing model, not your billing mechanism.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good place to kind of turn to that whole question. I think that's, you know, not just a problem or, you know, a challenge in where you started, but in any agency. I mean, I've talked to probably hundreds at this point of agencies, and if I asked them what the biggest challenge is, it's lead gen. So you've obviously, you know, have some sort of mechanism in place that's been effective for you. What what would you recommend to folks who are trying to solve that sales and marketing problem?
Resource it appropriately. Actually invest in it. Have the margin fundamentals in your P&L where you can afford to easily spend 10% of revenue on sales and marketing, and ideally even more, and still be able to pay yourself well as an owner. But that's the key. Like, I think everyone's looking for some sort of hack or some sort of arbitrage or some sort of thing, but you ask them, well, how much of your, they're looking for a tactic. But the reality is, like, if you ask a lot of agency owners, like, well, how much of your revenue as a percentage do you actually spend on marketing? And their answer might be like, I mean, we spend like, a couple $1,000 a month on marketing. We phone in some Facebook ads, like, or we phone in some Google ads. And it's like, well, yeah, like, you're not even trying. Like, it's like nothing, you haven't even tried to do marketing yet. Right. So I get it. It's like, because there's this paradox, like, unless you have, very strong gross margins, 50% minimum, so every, if you're delivering a project for 10 grand, it shouldn't cost you more than $5,000 to produce that. And that includes your in-house resources. So I look at a lot of agency P&Ls, and almost none of them, and I could actually say like none of them, literally none of them, have correct gross margins. So, and the reason for that is we can get into, but essentially, the reason for that is because most people's books are being done for like tax purposes often by a CPA, and all that matters for tax purposes is net margins. But when it comes to actually running your business, your gross margins are the most important line in your P&L, because that is what would be termed unit economics. So like, that's like the building blocks. So if you sell a $50K project, again, 50% gross margin minimum, I'd like to see it more like 60%. So it means, every single cost should not exceed $25K for a $50K project. And most people just put in just their freelancers and their contractors as COGS. And then they take their internal W-2 employees and they put them in OpEx, which all you have to do is do a quick Google search, and you could see that's completely wrong. Like, anything that's related to fulfilling the service needs to be under cost of goods sold.
Right.
Anything, that includes software subscriptions. That, if you subscribe to, Adobe Premiere for your video agency like we do, Adobe Premiere, Adobe Creative Suite is a cost of goods sold. Anything that you do to deliver that project needs to be in COGS, not just the variable labor. That's what most people do. They just put variable freelancers in COGS and internal stuff. So like, anyone who's project managing, anyone who's customer success, like, the only people who shouldn't be in COGS on your agency are salespeople. They can be in OpEx. Marketing, they're in OpEx. Finance, they're in OpEx. Like, admin, operation stuff. That's why it's called OpEx. Yeah. Again, it's so basically, to come around to the original question is like, most people don't realize why, like, they don't have a high enough gross margin. They don't know first of all, they don't know what their gross margin is. They're not doing it correctly. Second of all, they don't realize that it's way too low. Third, they can't afford to spend on marketing, because that would mean that they have to take a pay cut as an owner, or basically it's like their options are like spend on marketing or be profitable. And obviously they're going to choose to be profitable. So it's like, right. Yeah. So it's like, it all starts with, having, so how do we drive leads? We invest in it. We have incredible marketing leaders, not just, junior, people pushing buttons, sales and marketing leaders, incredibly talented salespeople. We're in a people business. It's like you can't expect to do great marketing if you don't invest in great people. You can't invest in great people if investing in those great people means you're not going to be profitable.
Right.
So
you have to, basically get the finances and the unit economics sorted out first. Then you can invest in the right places in your sales and marketing. As far as the sales and marketing is concerned, I know you mentioned, it's not less about tactics, but I do know, at least in my experience, being in that marketing seat, there's a lot of advice on the internet about, here's all the SaaS marketing techniques. And because we're in a people business, I feel like some stuff doesn't translate as well. There's a lot more high ticket offers, things like that. Have you found that there are, some channels or tactics that just don't translate well to a service-based business, and some that work just fine, but maybe people just aren't applying them well?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the more enterprise you go, the harder it is to get meta platforms to work, because Meta's targeting is still a little bit challenging to target B2B. There are platforms out there like Primer that can help a ton with that. But in general, I would say, it's much harder compared to like a consumer app or anything consumer, direct to consumer companies.
Sure.
I think I'm trying to think like what the biggest difference is. I just lost my train of thought there. Hold on, it'll come back to me. Come back.
Well, just basically, I guess what channels seem to be working most effectively for you guys? Like, is it swear by cold outbound? They might swear by Facebook ads.
Okay, I remember. I'm sorry. I remember exactly what I was going to say now. So to me, it all comes down to like, I think like an ounce of positioning is worth a pound of ad spend. So again, not to be like, oh, there's, tactics don't matter, but like, the best tactics don't matter if the strategy is incorrect. Right. So I think a lot of people are trying to get really deep on the tactics before they have a good positioning and good messaging and good value prop. So, all of our agencies are niche and specialized. So I think it's a lot easier to advertise if you can if you can niche down your messaging, kind of specialize your agency. It's advice that we've all heard, that it's like the riches are in the niches and all of these things. But, and it's true. And it's especially true with like cutting through the noise on ads. So I think that's like, just to be, tactical. Yeah, we do most of our spend goes to LinkedIn and Google, but and LinkedIn, the benefit of that approach is like, well, LinkedIn, you get in Google, you have intent, but you don't have any firmographic data you can target from. Like you can't control the size of the company that's clicking your ad on Google, but there is intent. Like they're getting ad and there's intent, but there's no firmographic targeting. You just gotta so that's the problem with that, is like you can get a bunch of leads that are way too small for you, but at least they want to buy, right? And occasionally you get hopefully every 1 in 10, like you get a good one. That's the problem with Google. It's like there's intent, but there's no firmographics. LinkedIn is the opposite. You have firmographics, but you have no intent. So like LinkedIn, you can do really good firmographic targeting. You can say, I want to advertise only to, marketing directors at, tech companies, from, 100 to 1,000 people, but you have no, understanding of if they're in market for your service. So that's like, but you want to have both. Now the problem also exists where like, in theory, you can advertise to those people on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn doesn't always have the best data for a lot of reasons, which probably are beyond the scope of this conversation, but you can actually upload your own data to LinkedIn. You can upload your own list of accounts to LinkedIn you want to advertise to. So that is how you can even, get better LinkedIn data. But yeah, I mean, I would say for us, that's where most of our dollars go, LinkedIn and Google. We've invested a lot on SEO and organic over the years. Now it's a little more kind of like passive, traffic for us there. But yeah, I think again that nothing's going to work if you are trying to like appeal to everyone and your message is super broad.
Yeah.
And a lot of things work if you're putting the right ad in front of the right people. So to me, it comes down to an ounce of positioning is worth a pound of ad spend.
That's a great quote right there. Kind of related to that, we talked about that you've actually been out of sales since I think 2023, which I know a lot of founders would love to be in that space. They probably did a lot of the sales themselves as they were growing, but at a certain point, you want to be able to go on vacation. You want to be able to hand off that role so that you're working on the business rather than in it. Can you talk a little bit about what that transition looked like for you and any advice that you'd share with others?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it kind of depends like on how you define it. It could have been actually even probably a lot earlier than that even. So I'll tell a quick story and then dig into the details. So basically I started the company in 2018, Testimonial Hero. I hired our first sales rep in November 2019. So pretty quickly, honestly. Testimonial Hero, I initially founded it to be, a productized service, was like the idea. And the idea, with productized services, now I would, I would say a little less productized as we've grown, but even especially back then we were very productized. But yeah, the idea with productized services is that it's simplifying a lot of what you do, how you scope it, how you price it, such that it doesn't require as much work to quote it and also to deliver it. So I think that's the first thing is like the more you can productize, the sooner you can get yourself out of sales. That's not to say like you should always be as productized as possible. I think, for one, like you can start productized initially and you can become like less productized over time as you kind of grow up market. And you can also, productization is like a strategic decision in a spectrum, but I think it's like that that helps a ton. Additionally, so 2019 hired my first salesperson. I went on my honeymoon in 2020. This was like in January 2020, so right before the world kind of went a little bit nuts. Yeah, I think in Thailand, so I just snuck it in. But basically, I was like, oh, we probably won't close any deals. He just started like, and he actually closed a couple of deals, and I was like, great, like I'm just gonna stop showing up for sales calls as much as possible now, like so it's one of those things that like so it's like creating a forcing function. Like I wouldn't have gotten out of sales so quickly if I hadn't, had a honeymoon, so I had to be gone for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot to be said for like planning a vacation, having some sort of forcing function. And then, like I said before, like productization helps a ton.
Yeah. No, I just talked to someone who runs an agency who their forcing function was they got diagnosed with cancer and they had to do treatment, and they're just like, well, I have to keep things afloat. And so it was like, they just had a life event that basically forced it. But ideally you want to be, being proactive about that before life forces you into a situation like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Another thing I was add is like, I think it's good to have optionality. So it's like the pinnacle of of leadership is like to never be required, but to always be helpful. And I think that is exactly true for like the sales situation. Like, I think if you just completely disappear from the sales process, you're going to be leaving a lot of money on the table. And in hindsight, I definitely left a lot of money on the table. Like but that was like kind of, well, it's hard to say. It's like, right, maybe I helped close some acquisitions that I wouldn't have had the bandwidth otherwise. So it's like, you never know. But I think there's like, I would never advise someone to be like, philosophically, you have to get out of sales completely or else like, but I think what you want is you want the option. You want the optionality. God forbid if you have a life event, like you mentioned, but also it's like, you want the option to be there, but not the requirement.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it honestly, in your situation where you already had the sales rep and you already had the positioning figured out, like that set them up for success while you were leaving. Like, I think if you hired a sales rep and you still had broad positioning and you kind of left them to kind of fend for themselves, the story might have ended much differently than it did.
100%. And I think it's not only the positioning, it's also the differentiation, which, subset, but similar. I think it's like, if you have really good positioning, but a ton of competitors, it's in a crowded space, it's also going to be hard. So I think it's also somewhat tied to how you, not just the wordsmithing of your positioning, but like your actual opportunity and how you go about it and how you deliver it. Like the more people are like, yeah, like I need this and there's not a lot of other options out there, the easier it's going to be for anyone to sell that. The lower the bar goes. And also, I mean, social proof, makes a huge difference. Like the higher your social proof, the more video testimonials and case studies you have, the lower that bar is for sales talent. You want to have so much overwhelming social proof that your salespeople are just tapping in putts or, barely, running the ball over the line. And it's already on the 1 yard line in the end zone. Like, you don't want to have so little social proof that you forcing people to do Herculean efforts, to close deals.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And something you would have a lot of experience in and know firsthand on. So,
100%.
well, I wanted to kind of pivot really quick. You mentioned this in passing, but you're now kind of in that space where you're looking at acquiring agencies, and I think a lot of people are curious. I'm curious, when you evaluate an agency, what you're looking at all sorts of things. What separates the ones that are built well from the ones that maybe just look good on paper?
Yeah, it's it's a good question. I think to be clear, I think we love to look at agencies in all stages, even if they're slightly distressed or need to be like turned around, or they're like a very rough diamond and they have a lot of problems but they have a lot of potential. So like in many respects, like we like those types of deals the most, where we can get when we can see an opportunity where like the bones of the agency are good, but there's, they're lacking, finance expertise that we can bring to the table. They're lacking a marketing engine, and we can, create value from that deal. So I think just like being completely honest, like we don't need the agency to be great. And then sometimes it's better for both parties. If their agency is totally perfect, like they might not want to sell it, and that's great for them. Good for them, or we might not want to pay that tip top price, right?
Yeah.
So I think that I think that's worth noting is like we love finding rough diamonds and bringing our expertise and polishing them up. And we've had a lot of success, with that. In terms of like what we look for, and what does like make an agency, a great agency, or I think, for us, it's like, we like to see like them being a specialist. Coming back to like our earlier topics of positioning, it's like, do they have a specialty? Do they have a niche? How accurate are their financials? That is, accurate financials are very important. A lot of times they're not, and that, we don't really expect that, but like, that's definitely, helps us. We don't have to re-educate them about certain things. But I mean, and then like the less dependent the agency is on the founder, obviously it's going to be worth more. The client concentration issues are going to be a big negative. If most of the revenue comes from 3 clients, those clients leave, the agency is going to shrink quite a bit. So like, that is a major issue. And then, gross margins, which we talked about. We're kind of like, obviously we don't actually expect people to have accurate gross margins, because we've yet to see it, but it's definitely an issue if we come in and see their gross margins are so low that like the business, to get them to our absolute minimum threshold of 30%, we have to like completely like change the business, and just not even worth the effort. Yeah. So like if we come in and we see like, their gross margins are effectively their net margins, like, and that can happen. Like people are like, like my, a lot of times it's like, okay, like everyone's heard, okay, 20-ish% net margin is like a good, rule of thumb for an agency, and that's like acceptable, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is when your gross margins are your net margins, because you're running at a scale where you have basically no OpEx. So like, that's definitely an issue. Like then it comes to the point of, it was like, like this business like is fundamentally, the unit economics of this business don't work, and we'd have to completely like rip and replace the pricing, how we fulfill everything. Like that can sometimes just isn't, maybe not worth the effort.
Yeah. As far as like the, maybe that, you're thinking behind acquiring agencies, in some spheres, it's like when you're acquiring another business, you're going to like fold it into your own like bigger business. But we've just been talking about specialization. Is your thinking more about having kind of like a centralized owner, but the companies run semi-independently? Can you talk just a little bit about like what maybe like kind of your vision around acquisitions?
Yeah. So I can talk about that, but I also want to add one kind of caveat I noted, and that's incubation. Like we're looking at incubations just as much as acquisitions. And like if, for example, with Product Type, which is our second, company in our portfolio, like we tried to do an acquisition in that space. We, couldn't close any deals, which is very common. Like, it's, pretty rare, honestly. I mean, it takes a lot to go right for buyers and sellers to see eye to eye on every single aspect of a deal, including valuation. And so, couldn't close. We tried to acquire a couple companies in that space, we weren't able to come to terms on those deals. And we're like, all right, well, we still want to be in this space. We'll just, incubate this ourselves. So that has been a really big success for us, and we like to do more of that. So if there's anyone who effectively wants us to help launch a company, like a video agency in our portfolio, like please do reach out. Like you don't have to be necessarily like a company with like 10 employees. Like you could be a freelancer and be like, yeah, I want to like be a part of the StorySnap portfolio and get those resources. So I'm very pro incubation as well. In terms of the vision for what we're building, it's still early days since we just launched our holdco last October. So less than a year ago. In general, like we're trying to strike a balance of not like hyper decentralized, and I'd say we're more centralized, where there's a lot of shared resources behind the scenes. And we look at these different brands as kind of different, like point of sales, like different storefronts. But behind the scenes, we're going to try and share as many resources as possible for efficiency and synergies and that. Like, it wouldn't make sense to run duplicate CRMs or anything like that. Like, we try to create as many operational efficiencies as possible behind the scenes.
Cool. Well, that makes sense. So basically trying to cut costs where it makes sense, so you're not duplicating things.
Yeah.
But still keep them distinct as far as delivery is concerned and as far as the market's concerned.
Correct. And the key thing is separate P&Ls is obviously a requirement. I think that goes without saying, but I'll say it anyways, just in case. Like, if you're doing that strategy like we are, where you have shared resources and like different point of sales, we don't have, like, everything for us is under the one LLC, but we have fully separate P&Ls, so we can look at every single business individually at the most granular level, every single business unit. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Would you, as far as like the org structure, does it affect things? Like, do you, would you have like individual CEOs of each of those companies still, or would things kind of fold up to the holding company?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they're right now. So we have, right now the companies aren't big enough to require individual CEOs. We hope that right now everything goes up to our president, and then from him it goes up to me. So a lot of benefits there, in terms of like operational complexity. Because if you have like 6 different CEOs, you have like, there's always a fire going on somewhere at any given day. Like, So like, I've talked to people who have like diversified holdcos and like businesses in like completely different industries. Like, they've got one like HVAC business and one agency and one, consumer product. And it's like, there's like, in any given day, like there's something is on fire, and it's never like, it always is going to, go up to head office, because it's just, that's how it is. So to answer your question, no, it's like, it's very centralized, and that's a huge benefit, I think, to our model. I mean, there's so many different ways to win in the holdco game, for sure. I don't think anything's better. It's just a different strategy. But right now, we don't need individual CEOs. It's we're still like high 7 figures. Cumulative revenue is not large enough to necessitate that yet. But we sure hope to get to the point where that would be a good problem to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been super helpful, super interesting. I think the listeners are going to get a lot of value out of it. If there's somebody who is interested in being acquired, or maybe just has some questions for you around how you've done things at your own agencies, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So pretty active checking LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me. Look me up on LinkedIn. Add me and include a note in your friend request or connection request, so I know you're not trying to sell me cold email services, like, which we already have, by the way. Don't reach out to me with cold email. We have so LinkedIn is mostly good. My inbox is a complete like dumpster fire it gets screened by my executive assistant, so probably will not make it to me. But another good way is if you reach out via StorySnap.com. Those form submissions will definitely make it to me. You can submit a form on StorySnap.com. Send me a message, and I love to chat with creative agency founders. We are actively looking to grow through acquisition and incubation, and especially when it comes to specialist video agencies. So if you run a specialist video agency or you freelance, and a specialist, as a specialist video creative, and you want to help, incubate or a new brand with us, and you want to play on a bigger stage and play in a bigger sandbox, or have us invest or acquire you. Like sometimes we're considering a minority investment too, where the founder keeps control. Love to chat, and even if it's years away, like happy to try and be helpful and help out however we can.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. This has been super helpful, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, David. It was my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.